My name is Doug Berger, and I'm Managing Director of Business Growth Services for Headwaters. This is excerpts from a keynote that I gave to CEOs and CFOs of family-owned and privately owned middle-market companies, and the subject was how to become a disruptive competitor. Doctor, I'm having growing pains. And what's the first thing the doctor does when you come in and you say you have some pain? He tells me, tell me, what are your pains? Take a look at this list. Competitive advantage erodes. Growth has plateaued. Finding new customers. The product line is tired. Problems in executing. Need new market opportunities. And an old mindset in the company. Where does most innovation happen? Most innovation happens in product performance and in the product platform. However, if you ask where does innovating have the most impact, you get a very different view of the world. And you see that overall, innovating has the highest impact when you're looking at things like finance, the business model, or when you're looking at the delivery system. And if you think of the companies that have been major disruptors recently, off-the-shelf technology, but they may be combining it in new ways into a new business model or a new delivery system. So I'm going to use the word innovating rather than innovation. And I want to use the word innovating to represent a much broader spectrum of turning business ideas into money. And so I'm going to walk you through a 5-step process for stepping up growth by innovating. And the first step of the process is this question, what are your growth goals? Now, every company has formal growth goals, and everyone at the top also has aspirational goals. Those are the goals that really light you up and turn you on. That's what gets you up in the morning, are your aspirational goals. And aspirational goals, by their very nature, are bold. Aspirational goals, by their very nature, have a certain element of being impractical. I can see some things I can do, but if you said, can I see the entire path to delivering on an aspirational goal? The answer is, of course not. If you could, it wouldn't be aspirational. So I want you to have in mind, while I'm talking, aspirational goals. With that in mind, we want to talk about the growth gap. And the growth gap is the gap between your current trajectory and these aspirational goals. You can think of it as a growth gap in revenue, market share, profitability, or let's say valuation. In my work with clients, productivity strategy is aimed at outcompeting. And the measures of the productivity strategy are, I'm increasing my market share, therefore I'm getting more revenue, and I'm increasing my profitability. That's the productivity strategy. And I'm doing it by outcompeting. Then there's an entrepreneurial strategy where what I'm really going after here are really new revenue streams. I'm taking the company into new places. What we're going to do is first we're going to take a deep dive into the productivity strategy. Then we're going to take a dive into the entrepreneurial strategy. These are the typical tactics for productivity growth. If you read the Wall Street Journal, you rarely hear a company doing anything other than these. So I want to take a different perspective on growth than those 7. I want to start by saying, where am I going to see growth? So we're going to look at this and go, if I'm going to really get growth, I'm going to get growth by retaining more customers, acquiring new customers, getting more value out of the customers that we've got, getting more revenue over the life of the customer. I'm going to get revenue by focusing the company on segments of outsized growth rather than segments that are growing slower. New customer segments that we're currently not serving and don't even define today as our market, but could. By optimizing the value chain and optimizing it in such a way that, again, it gives me a disruptive competitive advantage. All of you are probably familiar in some form or another with doing a strategic assessment, where you look at the market, the competitive dynamics, your own capabilities, the constraints that you're under, which might be regulatory or financial. I want to talk about doing a strategic assessment with a different frame, a different lens. And the lens I want to talk about is first doing it as an outsider in. The mistake that a lot of companies make is they do a strategic assessment from their point of view, except that the industry and the customers don't look from your point of view. The second thing is I want to overlay on the assessment these areas where you're going to focus on for growth. So instead of just going out into the market and assessing the competition or going out in the market and assessing the market dynamics, I want to look into the market now with the deltas in mind that are part of my strategy. Now I want to talk about some key drivers. Now we've got some areas that are interesting for us. How do we start to operationalize new areas of growth for productivity? So there's a term venture capitalists use, which is not every investment is a good investment and you have to drown some of your puppies. You'll love them. They're cute. They're cuddly, but they're not going anywhere. So you have puppies within your company that you need to drown. Every successful disruptor has to have an ability to do internal disruption. The next thing is you got to get out of the office. You'll find the opportunities by you going out and talking to customers, finding out what their problems are. Customers of competitors, finding out what they're happy with, what their problems are. Not just doing a sales call. Another growth practice is you resegment the market. The market developed one way. Now technologies change, customer requirements have changed, and oftentimes the way people are segmenting the market hasn't changed at all. Something that used to be a competitive advantage, now everyone has that. It's no longer a competitive advantage. It's just a requirement. Hunters versus farmers. Most salespeople, by and large, are farmers. They're great at maintaining and growing existing relationships. But if you look at your list, and a lot of your list is new segments or new customers, you need hunters. Hunters are a different breed, and you need to manage hunters differently. If you manage a hunter the same way that you manage a farmer, and the hunters will leave. Disruptors are shifting their view to organizing their company around the buying cycle. They're saying, how do people make decisions to buy when they recognize there's a need? And the second thing is, which relates to that, is what are people getting out of every one of our touch points? Are we building the brand in every touch point that we have with a customer? Are they walking away with exactly the brand experience we want them to be having at every touch point? Is one touch point moving them along in their buying cycle to the next touch point? Let me go through these other ones very, very quickly, and then we'll move on to entrepreneurial. Community of enthusiasts. If you're in B2B, social media is much of a thing. But community of enthusiasts are like users groups and other things like that are building energy for who you are and connecting other enthusiastic users of your products and services together so they become a community. And the stronger your community is, the stronger your company's future for growth is, because of the viral implications of that. We've got lead customers. These are the customers where the outsized growth is happening, and I can get insights about that. Instead of thinking about developing products, I'm developing product platforms. This lean transformation is taking principles of lean and using it to create disruptive advantages in your value delivery chain. Data analytics, huge. The amount of data that's now available on customers internally, mining those data analytics for real insights and action is becoming now new differentiators of the top competitors. And finally, what I call the innovating cycle, which is how you introduce some of this stuff in your company. This sums up productivity, and my experience is if you're trying on these new practices, it's worth a minimum of 15% in additional growth over the next 18 months. Now let's move to entrepreneurial strategy. Entrepreneurial strategy is always aspirational. You never have to go after, quote, new fundamental revenue streams. What makes something entrepreneurial? It makes it entrepreneurial if there's a high ratio of assumptions to knowledge. There's a lot of uncertainty. That's what people would say it's risk. What makes it a problem is that people fail to test their assumptions early and cheap. We're fishing in a pond that we think's a big pond. We tie investment to budgets rather than we tie spending some money to what we're learning and the milestone points. They rely on in-house capabilities when a lot of what you're doing in the revenue stream requires capabilities that you don't have in-house. The people are central. Some people are great at starting things, and some people are great at running things. And finally, as we talked about right at the beginning, bold is not immediately practical. I want to start in what's practical. Then as I get into it, I find out that some things are practical now that weren't practical 6 months ago. Now let's take a look at big places that entrepreneurial growth happens, new business models, emerging or disruptive benefits. You will find I never talk about emerging or disruptive technologies. Why? Those are usually lost leaders. If you can't associate a technology with a disruptive benefit, leave it to the startup community, leave it to universities. You have to have a disruptive benefit. New value chains, the Internet's doing that all over the place, and game-changing execution. That's taking that value stream optimization that we were talking about to a whole new level. Now we're going to do that market assessment, but now we're doing the market assessment not only from outside the company, we're doing a market assessment from outside the industry, because where disruption's likely to happen is from outside our industry. I want to look at what are new business models that are coming in from outside the industry and how they might relate. What are some new disruptive benefits that are starting to surface outside the industry that may now start to relate? Let's move to the particular practices and drivers. So one is this entrepreneurial mindset. There's a certain amount of entrepreneurial mindset you can develop, and there's a certain amount of entrepreneurial mindset you have to hire for. You've got to have people in the company who are naturally entrepreneurial. We talk about challenging assumptions. That's the easy part. Challenging beliefs are the things you believe in. We got to challenge those. Foresight, bringing a disruptive lens, that's what we were talking about doing that assessment from outside the industry to looking at what could come in. Opportunity arenas, because we're no longer looking for particular opportunities to play in. We're starting to scope out the market in terms of big ponds to fish. Instead of developing detailed product plans, we're developing a business model. Who are the target customers? How are we going to acquire them? What's the revenue characteristics going to look like? The cost characteristics going to look like? Who are we going to go into strategic relationships to help accelerate our entry in the market and de-risk entering the market? Design thinking, which is really based on having an empathetic understanding of your customer. You go out and you do deep observation of what's going on. You walk around the factory floor, getting inside the customer's shoes. Discovery-driven planning. When you're entering something, there are assumptions. Some assumptions have real financial implications. Great entrepreneurs do this very intuitively. They know which key assumptions really are going to affect revenue and profitability. Discovery-driven planning is a process where you can lay that out on a spreadsheet. Then you know what assumptions you have to test. So then you do smart strategic experiments. You look to create things with customers rather than create it and then go find customers. That de-risks it. Strategic relationships. You want to be very agile with your capital rather than investing in capital. And then there's this entrepreneurial execution model where you think about what you're doing like it's an internal startup. The benefits of this model are we're looking for opportunities that have asymmetric upside. But what it really means is that if things go well, this is huge. And I want to invest in revenue streams that have the opportunity, the possibilities there, not just for good, but for huge. I want to bound the loss or investment that I'm willing to take. I'm looking to have a high probability of success and faster to revenue and scale. So this model proves itself out by delivering those 4 key benefits. And then I have to ante some things in order to be able to go into this. I have to do things differently if I want to play entrepreneurially. This is that entrepreneurial environment where we have to be agile, lean, quick to change, not process-bound. We have to have starters that are involved, not finishers or runners. We have to be doing risk mitigation. We want to surface the risks. We want to create a register of where our risks are and then grow. In-house capabilities. What can I do with the resources I've got, and where do I need to bring in extended capabilities outside of the resources that I currently have? Where are there experts that I want to be able to tap from the university, retired executives? So now we've got entrepreneurial growth and the best practices for entrepreneurial growth. So I'd ask you one final question. As a senior executive or the owner or the president of your company, are you and your top team in alignment on growth? High-performing companies consistently outcompete traditional companies. I can start to put some of these practices in place, and the result of that is we'll be more high-performing, and that's going to affect everything we do regarding growth. So if we look and summarize this, there's where are your pain points? There's innovating versus innovation. Well, what are the areas where innovating is going to have the most impact? What's my growth gap? Then I looked at the productivity strategy and the growth gap, and what are the best practices for productivity strategy? Then we shifted to the entrepreneurial strategy, and we looked at the practices that have line of sight, direct linkage to entrepreneurial type growth. I'd like to leave you with this one thought, that in adopting these practices, you become the disruptor, and then you leave the competition worried. Thank you.